They say a widow's grief is a private ocean, a vast and silent thing that can drown you in the blink of an eye. But what if the only thing you feel is relief? What if the death of your husband isn't an ending, but the beginning of your real life? My story is about tearing down a kingdom built on lies, even if it means burning my own past to the ground. It's a story of a quiet old woman who decided to get loud, and trust me, you won't want to miss a single second of the fallout. So before we begin, make sure you follow my channel like this video and hit that notification bell because the storm is just getting started and you'll want a front row seat. I didn't shed a tear as they lowered Richard's casket into the frozen Ohio earth. The ground was hard, resistant, a perfect mirror for the heart he had forged in me over 52 years of marriage. 52 years. The number felt obscene, a life sentence I had served without parole. Around me, a small crowd of carefully selected business associates and distant family members shivered in the biting November wind, their faces arranged in masks of solemn respect. They were mourning the man they thought they knew, Richard Sterling, the real estate titan, the philanthropist, the pillar of the community. They had no idea his greatest development project was the slow, meticulous demolition of my soul. My children, Leo and Chloe, stood beside me. Leo, my son, had his arm wrapped around my shoulders, a gesture that was meant to look like comfort, but felt like a cage. His sorrow was a well-rehearsed performance, the deep, mournful sighs timed for maximum effect. He'd learned stagecraft from his father. Chloe, my daughter, stood slightly apart, her eyes red-rimmed but dry, staring at the polished mahogany box descending into the dark slit in the earth. Her grief was real, I thought, but it was for the father she'd invented, not the man who had actually lived in our house. And then there was Cynthia, Leo's wife. She clutched his other arm, her perfectly manicured nails a blood red against the black wool of his coat. Her gaze wasn't on the grave. It was on me, a quick, assessing glance like a hawk measuring its prey. She wasn't calculating my grief. She was calculating my assets. I could feel the cold arithmetic of her thoughts, even through the layers of my own feigned sorrow. I was the true actor here today. My performance had been in rehearsal for 6 long months, ever since Richard's doctor had given him his final, non-negotiable deadline. While he lay in his bed, fading into a haze of medication and regret I had been preparing. While my children visited bringing flowers and false comfort I had been studying, the minister's voice droned on a meaningless wash of words about heaven and peace. Peace. What a foreign concept. As the first clump of frozen dirt hit the casket, the sound was a dull, final thud, a period at the end of a very long, very ugly sentence. This was my cue. I focused on that sound, let it be the trigger. I allowed a tremor to start in my hands, a weakness to creep into my knees. I took a sharp, theatrical breath. Leo tightened his grip. "Mum? Are you okay?" I didn't answer. I let my knees buckle completely. It wasn't an act of grief, it was an act of war, a declaration. I didn't faint. I chose to fall. I surrendered to gravity, letting my body go limp, a puppet with its strings cut. The world tilted a blur of grey sky, worried faces, and the dark, open mouth of the earth. I closed my eyes just before I hit the ground, and for the first time in a very long time, I felt a flicker of something that might one day become freedom. The transition from the cold, hard ground of the cemetery to the sterile white of a hospital room was a jarring leap in my script. I let myself float in the comfortable blackness for as long as I could, listening to the muffled sounds around me. The rhythmic beep of a machine, the squeak of rubber-soled shoes on linoleum, the low, anxious murmur of my children's voices. They were all there, waiting. I knew what they were waiting for. They expected me to wake up, cry a little, be the fragile, grieving widow, and then quietly recede into the background of their lives, a problem to be managed. They had no idea I was about to become the central plot. I chose my moment carefully. I let out a soft groan, a sound of pure confusion. I fluttered my eyelids, letting the harsh fluorescent light sting them. I blinked slowly, deliberately. Leo's face swam into view above me. His expression was a carefully curated blend of concern and relief. Mum, Mum, you're awake. You gave us such a scare. Cynthia and Chloe crowded in behind him, three expectant faces waiting for their mother to return to them. I looked at Leo. I let my eyes drift over his familiar features, the sandy hair he'd inherited from me, the stern jawline he'd gotten from his father. I held his gaze for a long moment, then let my own fill with a deep, vacant bewilderment. I turned my head slowly, my gaze moving past him to Cynthia, with her sharp, predatory beauty, and then to Chloe, whose face was puffy and blotched with real tears. I looked at the IV in my hand, the crisp white sheets, the beige walls of the room. I let the silence stretch until it was taut and uncomfortable. Then I turned my eyes back to the three of them, the children I had raised, and delivered my opening line. My voice was a dry, raspy whisper. Who? Who are you people? The effect was instantaneous and profound. It was like a switch had been flipped, plunging the room into a different kind of silence, one filled not with grief, but with shock and a sudden, sharp uncertainty. Chloe's hand flew to her mouth, a small gasp escaping. Leo's face crumpled, the manufactured concern replaced by a genuine panicked confusion. Mum, it's me. It's Leo. Your son. But it was the look that passed between Leo and Cynthia that told me everything. It was a flicker, a micro-expression that lasted less than a second. But I caught it. I had spent a lifetime reading the silent, damning language of my husband's moods, and this was no different. It wasn't a look of concern for my well-being. It wasn't fear for my health. It was the quick, stunning, silent recognition of an unlocked door. It was opportunity. In that single, shared glance, I saw the future they were already building for me, a future without a past, without a home, without a voice. And I knew with a certainty that chilled me more than the November air at the graveside that my performance had to be flawless. My life now depended on it. For the next 3 days, I became a ghost in my own life, a blank slate upon which they projected their desires and their impatience. The doctors ran their tests, flashing lights in my eyes, asking me my name, the year, the president. I offered them nothing but a placid, smiling confusion. Olivia Sterling. The name sounded vaguely familiar, like a character from a book I'd read long ago. Richard. I would ask about him, as if he were just in the next room, maybe fetching a cup of tea. Is Richard coming soon? I'd ask Chloe, my voice infused with a gentle, childlike hope that made her burst into fresh tears. It was a draining performance. Every moment was a calculation. I had to be convincingly lost, but not so lost that they'd suspect a stroke or something more severe that would require round-the-clock expensive neurological care. Amnesia was perfect. It was vague, dramatic, and most importantly, it was a condition that could theoretically be managed outside of a hospital in a more comfortable setting. I played the part of a confused old woman to perfection. When my granddaughter Mia came to visit, it was the most difficult act of all. She burst into the room, her purple-streaked hair a vibrant slash of colour in the sterile environment. She ran to my bedside, her young face etched with a raw, honest fear that sliced right through me. "Grandma, it's me, Mia?" She held up her phone, showing me a picture of the two of us from the previous summer, laughing in the garden, my arms covered in dirt, a smudge of it on her nose. I looked at the image of the happy, vibrant woman I used to be, or at least the woman I pretended to be for her sake. I felt a pang of real loss, a grief for that version of myself that was sharper than any I felt for Richard. I looked from the photo to her hopeful, terrified eyes and offered her only a blank, pleasant stare. "What a lovely girl," I murmured. "Is she your daughter?" The look of devastation on Mia's face was a physical blow. It was the first real cost of my war, the first piece of my own heart I had to sacrifice. The true verdict on my future wasn't delivered by a doctor with a clipboard, but in whispers at the foot of my bed, late on the third night. I had perfected the art of shallow, even breathing, of lying utterly still, a convincing portrait of deep, medicated sleep. The door creaked open, and a sliver of hallway light cut across the floor. It was Leo and Cynthia. They stood there for a long moment, their silhouettes dark against the light, watching me. "She's sleeping like a baby," Cynthia whispered, her voice a sharp, slicing sound in the quiet room. "The sedative is working. She looks so small." Leo said, his voice thick with a sentimentality I knew was genuine but utterly useless. He still saw me as his mother, an object of pity, and a problem to be solved with kindness. He was a good man, my Leo, but his goodness was a soft, malleable thing, easily shaped by a stronger will. And Cynthia's will was forged from steel. "She can't go back to that house, Leo." Cynthia continued her tone, shifting from observation to strategy. "It's not safe. Think of the stairs, the upkeep, and all the memories. It will just confuse her more." "I don't know, Sin." Leo hesitated. "It's her home. It's where we grew up. And it's a gold mine." She shot back, her voice dropping lower, more intense. "You know what Peterson said. The market in this neighborhood is white hot. We could list it next week and have offers over asking by the end of the month. Think of the taxes, the insurance, the maintenance. It's a financial drain, Leo. With her gone, with her in this state, it's just not practical." I lay there, my eyes closed, my heart beating a slow, cold rhythm against my ribs. A financial drain, a practical problem. They were talking about my home, the place where I had raised them, the silent witness to every joy and every unspeakable horror of my 52-year marriage. They were talking about it like it was an underperforming stock to be offloaded. Leo was quiet for a long time. I could almost feel the struggle inside him, the weak pull of sentimentality against the powerful tide of Cynthia's logic. Finally, he sighed a sound of complete and utter capitulation. "You're right." He said the words, tasting like ash in my silent mouth. "And we'll find her a nice place. A really nice one. Somewhere she'll be safe. Somewhere with professional care. Safe. The word was a lie. They weren't talking about my safety. They were talking about my containment. They weren't planning my recovery. They were planning my disposal. They were liquidating my life piece by piece, starting with the house and ending with me. And as they slipped out of the room, leaving me alone in the humming darkness, I felt no fear, only a cold, clarifying rage. The performance was working. The trap was being set. And they were walking right into it. My granddaughter Mia was the only one who looked at me and didn't see a vacant shell. She saw a puzzle. While Leo and Cynthia were busy making phone calls to real estate agents and top-rated senior living facilities, Mia would sit by my bed, her presence a quiet, unwavering challenge to my charade. A 19-year-old with a formidable TikTok following and an even more formidable sense of intuition, she saw past the act. Her generation had a built-in detector for anything that wasn't authentic, and my performance, as flawless as it was, pinged her radar. She didn't badger me with questions about the president or the date. She came at me sideways through the back door of our shared history. Grandma, she'd ask, her voice soft, as she scrolled through photos on her phone. She'd stop on one of us in the backyard, kneeling in the dirt. "Remember our secret garden behind the old shed? You told me the zinnias were soldiers guarding the flocks. You said they were the toughest flowers, and they'd protect the others. I would stare at the vibrant image, my heart a lead weight in my chest. I remembered. I remembered the feel of the warm earth on my hands, the scent of the tomato plants, the way Mia's small face would light up when a ladybug landed on her finger. Those moments in the garden were the only times I felt I was truly living, not just enduring. They were our small, beautiful rebellion against the sterile tyranny of the main house. To deny them felt like a betrayal of the highest order. I had to force my face to remain a placid mask, my eyes empty. What a pretty thought, I'd murmur, turning my head toward the window. I could feel her watching me, her brow furrowed, refusing to accept the stranger I was pretending to be. Her suspicion was a complication, but it was also a lifeline. I knew even then that she was the only one I might be able to trust. My first real test, the first true obstacle in my path, arrived not in the form of a doctor or a concerned relative, but a man in a pinstripe suit carrying a leather briefcase. His name was Peterson, the family lawyer, a man whose smile was a predatory baring of teeth. Leo and Cynthia ushered him in, as if he were a visiting dignitary. "Good morning, Olivia," he said, his voice oozing a synthetic sympathy. He pulled a chair close to my bed. "We've been so worried about you. The children just want to make things easier for you while you recover." I watched him, my expression one of mild, pleasant confusion. Cynthia stood behind him, her arms crossed her posture, radiating an impatient energy. Leo hovered by the door, wringing his hands, a portrait of filial anxiety. Peterson clicked open his briefcase and produced a sheaf of papers and a sleek, expensive-looking fountain pen. "This is just a formality, Olivia," he explained, spreading the document on the bedside table. I could read the bold letters at the top, even from my position, durable power of attorney. It was the key to my kingdom. Signing it would grant Leo and Cynthia complete control over my finances, my property, my medical decisions. It would be the legal instrument of my erasure. "This simply allows Leo to handle your affairs," Peterson continued smoothly. "Pay the bills, manage the house, just until you're feeling like yourself again. It's to protect you. Protect me." The lie was so bold, so audacious, it was almost impressive. They wanted to protect my assets from me. Cynthia leaned forward slightly, her eyes fixed on the document. "It's for the best, Mom. We just want to help." Peterson uncapped the pen and held it out to me. "If you could just sign right here on the bottom line." This was it. The moment of truth. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic bird in a cage. My plan, so carefully constructed, felt terrifyingly fragile. A single signature, and it was all over. I had to refuse, but I couldn't seem oppositional. A confused old woman wouldn't argue legal points. She would simply be unable. I reached out my hand slowly. I let a fine, convincing tremor start in my fingers, an old woman's palsy. It was an echo of the tremor I'd felt for years, born of fear of my husband. Now I was weaponizing it. I took the heavy pen from Peterson. My hand shook more violently as I moved it toward the paper. I looked at the line where my name was supposed to go, the black slash that would sign away my life. I let my gaze drift up my eyes, wide and unfocused. Richard always handled the papers. I said, my voice thin and wavering. He was so good with numbers. "Richard is gone." "Mom," Leo said gently, taking a step closer. "It's okay. We're here to help you now." "Help!" I repeated the word, as if I didn't understand it. I lowered the pen. The nib hovered an inch above the signature line. The air in the room was thick with anticipation. Cynthia was practically holding her breath. I could feel her will pushing at me, trying to force my hand down. And then, with a final convulsive jerk of my hand, I let the pen slip from my trembling fingers. It clattered onto the linoleum floor, a small, loud, defiant sound. I pulled my hand back and sank against the pillows, letting out a long, weary sigh. I closed my eyes. I'm so tired, I mumbled, my voice trailing off into a whisper. So very tired. Silence. Peterson stared at the pen on the floor, his professional composure cracking for just a second. Leo rushed forward. It's okay, Mum. It's okay. We can do it later. You need to rest. He looked at the lawyer, an apology in his eyes, but I wasn't looking at them. Through my barely open eyelids, I was watching Cynthia. Her face was a mask of tightly controlled fury, a flicker of lightning. Her jaw was clenched, and a small muscle pulsed in her cheek. She had been so close. My small act of defiance, this tiny crack in my facade of helplessness, had thwarted her. It wasn't a permanent victory, I knew that. It was a skirmish, not the end of the war. But it bought me time. And in the war, I was planning to wage time was the most valuable currency of all. As Leo fussed over my blankets and Peterson packed away his papers with a frustrated snap, I lay perfectly still, my victory, a secret silent hum beneath my tired old woman disguise. They thought they had hit a small delay. They had no idea they had just collided with the first obstacle of many. The pen felt foreign in the doctor's hand, too clean, too quick. Dr. Evans, Cynthia's golfing partner, they'd called him. He had teeth that were too white and a voice that was a smooth, practiced syrup of concern. He held up a finger, a simple cognitive test. I stared right through it, focusing on a water stain on the ceiling, letting my mind go blessedly, performatively blank. Olivia. Can you follow my finger for me, Olivia? Leo was beside me, his hand resting on my shoulder, in a gesture that was meant to look like comfort, but felt like an anchor. He smelled of expensive cologne and impatience. Cynthia, on my other side, was a statue of solemn support, her lips pursed in a perfect imitation of grief-stricken worry. It's no use. Dr. Cynthia sighed, her voice catching with practiced fragility. She's been like this for days. Sometimes she hums. Sometimes she just stares. We're so worried she'll hurt herself. The fall at the funeral was a significant trauma, Dr. Evans said, making a note on his clipboard. The scratch of his pen was the sound of my freedom being signed away. Combined with the emotional shock, it's a classic presentation, a dissociative fugue progressing into significant cognitive decline. She's a risk to herself. In my professional opinion, she requires 24-hour supervised care for her own safety. Leo squeezed my shoulder. Whatever is best for her, doctor. That's all we want. The lie was so bold, so audacious. It was almost beautiful in its purity. I had to stop myself from smiling. Instead, I let a thin line of drool escape the corner of my mouth. Cynthia noticed and dabbed it away with a tissue, her touch brisk and repulsed. The perfect, caring daughter-in-law. Within a week, I was a resident of Pleasant Meadows Assisted Living. The name was a masterpiece of cruel irony. The air wasn't pleasant. It was a chemical fog of lemon-scented disinfectant and boiled cabbage. The meadows were non-existent, replaced by beige walls, beige carpets, and beige uniforms on the staff who moved with a weary, practiced cheerfulness. A nurse named Brenda, whose smile never quite reached her eyes, took me through intake. She spoke slowly, loudly, as if I were a child or a tourist, with a poor grasp of the language. And this will be your room, Olivia. Isn't it cozy? We're going to take your personal phone now, dear. We find they just add to the confusion. You don't need to worry about a thing like that anymore. She pried my old smartphone from my hand, her fingers gentle but firm. But look what we have for you. She held it up like a prize. A basic, no-brand tablet. This is for you to use. It has simple games on it. Solitaire. Word search. It connects to the Wi-Fi so you can see pictures of your family if they send them. They thought they were leaving me with a digital pacifier. They didn't know that for the 6 months that Richard's lungs had been slowly, finally failing him, I had been a diligent student. While he dozed in a morphine haze, I sat at my old laptop, the screen a secret glow in the darkened room. I hadn't been watching soap operas or looking at recipes. I had been on YouTube. I had learned about virtual private networks from a teenager in India. I had learned about encrypted email from a German privacy advocate. I had learned how to navigate the labyrinth of online banking, how to move money through digital shells, how to cover my tracks from a disgraced financial advisor now selling his secrets for Patreon subscribers. Richard had built an empire on secrets and intimidation. I was simply learning a new language to dismantle it. That night, the door to my beige room clicked shut. The lock was on the outside, of course, for my safety. For a moment, a wave of genuine fear washed over me. The smell of the disinfectant, the profound, echoing silence, the sheer totality of my confinement. What if I failed? What if they were right, and I was just an old woman who had lost her mind and was now trapped in a pastel prison of her children's making? I took a breath. I let the fear pass through me, acknowledging it, and then I let it go. Fear was Richard's tool. It would not be mine. I sat on the edge of the stiff, narrow bed and picked up the tablet. The screen came to life. On the home screen were the promised games, a cartoon cat, a deck of cards, a grid of letters. I ignored them. I found the settings icon. The facility's Wi-Fi network was unsecured. The password was pleasant1223. I almost laughed. Amateurs. I connected, opened the pre-installed web browser, and immediately went into private mode. I typed in the address for my VPN provider. My fingers, which had trembled so convincingly when I'd refused to sign their power of attorney, were steady now. I activated the service, routing my digital presence through a server in Switzerland. To Pleasant Meadows, it would look like I was playing a game of Sudoku. To the world, I was a ghost. My next step was to access the new bank account I'd opened weeks before, funded by the secret sale of my mother's jewelry, a small act of rebellion I'd committed years ago. The money sat there clean and untouched. My money. I then opened my encrypted email client. There was only one person I could trust. An old friend, a man of integrity, someone Richard had despised for that very reason. A man I hadn't spoken to in nearly 20 years, Arthur Vance. I composed the email. The words had to be perfect, precise. Arthur. It's Olivia. Olivia Shaw. Richard's Olivia. I know it has been a long time. Forgive the unorthodox method of contact. I find myself in a peculiar situation. My family believes I have lost my faculties. They have placed me in a facility called Pleasant Meadows. I am writing to you on a tablet they provided for my entertainment. I need to be clear. I am of sound mind. I am in full control of my thoughts. This is a deliberate act on my part, a strategy. I cannot say more at this time. I need counsel. I need someone on the outside who knows I am not who I appear to be. I have transferred a retainer to your firm from the account details I will send in a separate secured message. Please confirm receipt. My instructions for now are simple, and you must follow them without question. Do nothing. Say nothing. Acknowledge nothing. Simply watch. Watch my children. Watch the news. The time to act will come, but it is not now. For now, you are my silent witness. Your old friend, Olivia. I hit send. The small whoosh sound was the first shot fired in a war no one else knew had begun. I leaned back against the propped-up pillows, the cool plastic of the tablet, a reassuring weight in my lap. The gilded cage had its conveniences. They brought me my meals. They did my laundry. And they gave me the one thing I needed more than anything else, time, and the illusion of my complete and utter helplessness. Mia visited every Sunday, a dutiful angel of mercy walking into the lion's den. She was 19, all sharp angles, and a heart so open and earnest it ached to look at her. She would sit in the uncomfortable visitor's chair, scrolling through her phone, showing me TikTok videos of dancing dogs and telling me about her college applications. Her voice trailing off as she looked at my vacant expression. "Grandma," she'd ask, her voice small. "Are you in there at all today? I got an early acceptance from NYU. I thought, I thought you'd be happy." I'd just hum my eyes fixed on the window on a sliver of grey sky. The performance was draining. Seeing the genuine hurt in her eyes was the hardest part of it all. She was the only one whose love was not transactional, and I was about to exploit it in the most profound way. On her fourth visit, the time was right. I had practiced the moment in my head 1,000 times. I waited until she was about to leave, her shoulders slumped in defeat. "Mia," I whispered. She froze her hand on the doorknob. She turned around slowly, her eyes wide. "Grandma." I forced myself to look at her. Really look at her. And let the mask crack. I let the real tears, the ones I felt for what I was about to do to her, well up in my eyes. I reached out a hand, making it tremble. "Mia, my love, come here." She rushed to my side, grabbing my hand. It was warm. So warm. "Grandma, you're talking. Listen to me," I said, my voice a dry, urgent rasp. "There isn't much time. They think I'm gone. But I'm still here. I'm just trapped." I squeezed her hand, my grip surprisingly strong. I saw the shock and hope flood her face. I was a brilliant actress. It made me sick. "What is it? What can I do?" she asked, leaning in close. "In the house," I whispered, "in the basement. Behind the old furnace, tucked away on the left side, there's a loose stone in the wall. Behind it, there's a box, a small wooden box. It has my mother's letters in it. All her letters to me. It was a lie woven from a thread of truth. There was a loose stone, a detail Richard had pointed out once, laughing about the shoddy work of the original builders. But there were no letters. Your parents, your father and Cynthia, they wouldn't understand. They're getting rid of everything. I need those letters, Mia. They're all I have left of her. I need you to get them for me. Please." I let a single perfect tear roll down my cheek. I saw her heart swell with the gravity of the mission. She wasn't just visiting her senile grandmother anymore. She was a secret agent, a savior. "Don't let them see you," I begged, my voice cracking. "It has to be our secret. Can you do that for me? Can you keep our secret?" She nodded, her own eyes now filled with tears. "Of course, Grandma. Of course I will. I'll get them for you. I'll bring them next Sunday." "Thank you, my love." I breathed, releasing her hand and letting my eyes drift back to the window, the veil of confusion falling once more. Such a pretty bird. She left the room, her steps light with purpose. I closed my eyes, the guilt a cold stone in my stomach. I had just weaponized my own granddaughter's love. But there was no other way. The week that followed was the longest of my life. I played solitaire on the tablet until my eyes burned. I ate the bland, mushy food. I smiled vacantly at the nurses. I let them bathe me and dress me like a doll. And I waited. On Friday evening, 2 days before Mia's next visit, I saw the network traffic on my tablet suddenly change. A new device had connected to the house's Wi-Fi. Then another. And another. My heart hammered against my ribs. She'd done it. My clever, brave girl had done it. I opened the secure viewing app I had installed. The screen, which had been blank, flickered to life. It split into 4 quadrants. The first showed my living room, the afternoon sun, slanting across the floorboards where I had taught Leo to walk. The second was the kitchen, the chipped countertop where I had bandaged Chloe's scraped knees. The third was the upstairs hallway, a view of Richard's office door. And the fourth was a close-up of the office itself, angled down from the top of a bookshelf. She had found the box. She had opened it and found not yellowed envelopes, but 3 tiny high-definition micro-cameras. And without question, driven by love and a sense of righteous secrecy, she had done exactly what the simple pictograph instructions inside had asked her to do. She had placed them. My ghost was in the machine. I was no longer a prisoner in Pleasant Meadows. I was a silent, all-seeing eye in the heart of my own home. My life had been taken from me, and now from a distance I was taking it back, pixel by pixel. The show began on a Tuesday. I watched, propped up in my bed, a cup of lukewarm tea on my bedside table as the movers arrived. Cynthia directed them with the cold efficiency of a field marshal, a clipboard in her hand, and a slash of red lipstick on her mouth. Her voice, tinny through the tablet's speaker, was sharp and clear. The wingback chair that goes to auction. Tag it. The Persian rug, too. It's probably worth a bit. The rest of the furniture in this room. Just take it to the dump. I want it gone by lunch. I saw 2 men heave away the armchair where I had read hundreds of bedtime stories to my children. It disappeared out the front door without a backward glance. Chloe was there, a shadow following in Cynthia's wake. She was supposed to be packing up my personal belongings. I watched her in the bedroom, pulling my clothes from the closet. She held up a blue silk dress one Richard had bought me for our 25th anniversary. She buried her face in it, and her shoulders shook with sobs. For a moment, a flicker of something pity-maternal instinct stirred in me. Then she folded the dress and placed it carefully in a box marked "Donate." Her tears were not for me. They were for the comfortable, easy life she was afraid of losing, for the mother she wished she had not the one she was currently discarding. They swept through the house like a fire, consuming my life, my history, and turning it into neatly labeled boxes for auction, donation, or trash. Photo albums filled with decades of birthdays and holidays were tossed into black garbage bags with the morning's coffee grounds. Cynthia didn't want any inconvenient, tangible memories cluttering up their new narrative. But the main event, the performance I had been waiting for, began when they finally broached Richard's office, a room I hadn't set foot in for over a decade. The door had always been closed, not locked, but sealed by a silent mutual understanding. It was his space, his world. I had my own ghosts. I had no desire to confront his. Leo pushed the door open. "All right," he announced to Cynthia and Chloe, who hovered behind him. "This is it. If he hid anything, it's in here." "Did he ever update his will?" Cynthia asked, stepping inside and running a finger over the dusty mahogany desk. "The one Arthur Vance has on file is from 30 years ago. It leaves everything to her." She gestured vaguely in the direction of Pleasant Meadows. "He must have," Leo said, his voice tight, with a mixture of greed and hope. Dad was always talking about how lawyers and the government couldn't be trusted. He said his real legacy, his real wealth, was in the bones of the house. He must have hidden a new will. Or cash, stock certificates, something. From my beige room, I watched them. It was like seeing a play for which I had written the script. They started with the obvious. They emptied the desk drawers, finding only old pens, stationery, and utility bills. They ran their hands along the spines of the leather-bound books, shaking them, hoping for a key or a loose sheet of paper to fall out. Nothing. Chloe, ever the sentimentalist, found a small silver frame with a picture of herself and Leo as children sitting on Richard's lap. "I remember this day," she said softly. "We went to the zoo." Chloe focused. Cynthia snapped, not even looking at the photograph. "We're not here to reminisce. We're here to secure your future. Leo, check behind that painting." Leo pulled down a large, dark landscape of a stormy sea. He rapped his knuckles against the wall behind it. The sound was a dull, solid thud. His shoulders slumped. Their frustration was a living thing in the room. It was delicious. It was the most satisfying meal I'd had in months. They were like rats in a maze of their own making, sniffing for a cheese that wasn't there. "This is ridiculous," Cynthia said, her voice rising. "A man like Richard Shaw doesn't just die and leave a 30-year-old will. He was meticulous. He was a predator. He wouldn't be this simple." It was the most perceptive thing I had ever heard her say. "The floor," Leo said suddenly, his eyes gleaming with a new idea. He got down on his hands and knees, running his hands over the old oak floorboards. "He used to have this rug right here. Always told us never to move it." He started knocking on the boards. Thud, thud, thunk. His head snapped up. "There. You hear that it's hollow." Cynthia's eyes lit up. "Get the crowbar from the garage." I watched as my son, a man who worked in finance and wore $300 shoes, jammed a rusty crowbar under the floorboards of his father's office. The wood splintered with a sickening crack. He heaved, grunting with the effort, sweat beading on his forehead. Chloe watched, chewing on her thumbnail, her face pale. He pulled up one board, then another, revealing the dark, dusty space beneath. There was nothing, just dirt and cobwebs. Leo let out a roar of pure animal frustration and threw the crowbar against the wall, leaving a deep gash in the plaster. Nothing. Where the hell did the old bastard hide it? I took a slow, deliberate sip of my tea. The porcelain was warm against my lips. They were looking for paper, for cash, for something they could spend. They were looking for Richard's money. But I knew what they were really looking for, even if they didn't have the words for it. They were looking for the source of his power, the foundation of the kingdom they had inherited. And I knew with a certainty that was as cold and hard as steel that they would never ever find it where they were looking. They were tearing apart the floorboards when they should have been looking at the hearth. But their time would come. I would make sure of it. The dust motes danced in the slivers of afternoon light, slanting through the grimy windows of my old bedroom. On my tablet screen, another kind of dust was being raised. Leo paced the worn Persian rug, his hands clenched his face, a mask of frustration. He looked smaller on the screen, diminished by the cavernous room and the weight of his own failure. Chloe was curled on the edge of the bed, picking at a loose thread on the duvet. But it was Cynthia, my daughter-in-law, whose voice cut through the stale air. "Well, are you just going to wear a trench in the carpet? Or are you going to do something?" She said, her arms crossed tightly. She was perched on the chaise lounge near the window, a vulture surveying a disappointing kill. "Do what Cynthia." Leo snapped back, his voice thin. "We've been through everything. The office, the attic, the safe deposit box. There's nothing. A few thousand in a checking account, and this house which we can't even sell yet." He talked about legacy, about building an empire, for God's sake. "Where is it?" "Maybe he was just a liar," Chloe mumbled into the bedding. "Maybe it was all a big performance." "No," Cynthia said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial hiss. "Men like Richard don't lie about money. They hide it. Think Leo. Did he ever say anything? Anything strange? A joke, a story you didn't understand at the time?" I watched Leo stop pacing. He stood still in the center of the room, his eyes unfocused. I knew the exact memory flickering behind them. I had been there when Richard told the story years ago on a Christmas Eve, thick with the scent of pine and whiskey. A story about his own father, a stonemason, who always said the strongest part of a house is the hearth, the place you'd hide your heart if you had to. A sentimental platitude from a man who had no heart to hide. The hearth. Leo whispered, his eyes slowly focusing on the grand marble-faced fireplace that dominated the far wall. He told a story once. About his father. He said the hearth keeps the secrets. Cynthia was on her feet in an instant. "What are you waiting for?" Chloe sat up, her eyes wide. "Leo, you can't be serious. You're not going to—" Smash it, are you? Get me the sledgehammer from the garage, Leo said to Cynthia, completely ignoring his sister. His voice had a new charge, a current of desperate hope. I watched as Cynthia, a predator who had just caught a new scent, practically sprinted out of the room. Chloe wrung her hands. Leo, this is crazy. Mum. What would Mum say? Mom's not here, is she? Leo said, his voice cold. He ran a hand over the cool marble, his fingers tracing the veins in the stone. He was his father's son in that moment, seeing only the value, the potential for extraction. Cynthia returned, holding the heavy sledgehammer with a grim reverence. She didn't offer it to Leo. She held it out like a scepter. Don't chip it. We need to be able to fix it without anyone noticing. Just stand back, he grunted, taking the tool. It looked too big for him. He hefted it awkwardly, positioning himself before the fireplace. The first swing was tentative. It glanced off the marble facing with a sharp crack, sending a spiderweb of fractures across the polished surface, but doing little else. Hit it harder, Cynthia urged, her voice tight with impatience. Pretend it's one of your father's business rivals. Leo's jaw tightened. He took a deep breath, swung again, and this time he put his whole body into it. The sound that came through my tablet's speakers was a sickening crunch, a percussive explosion of stone and plaster. Dust billowed out in a thick, choking cloud. Chloe screamed and buried her face in a pillow. Through the haze, I saw Leo stumble back, coughing. He swung again and again. Each impact was a punctuation mark in their desecration of my home, my life. They weren't just breaking stone. They were shattering memories. The spot where Richard had proposed. The place I had stood warming my hands on the morning I found out I was pregnant with Leo. It was all being reduced to rubble. Finally, after a dozen brutal blows, a large section of the facade crumbled inward, revealing not brick and mortar, but a dark, hollow cavity. There, Leo breathed, dropping the sledgehammer with a heavy thud. It was all he could manage. He was coated in a fine white powder, looking like a ghost of himself. Cynthia pushed him aside, peering into the darkness. Get a flashlight. Now. Chloe, drawn in by the morbid curiosity that had replaced her fear, crept forward with her phone switching on its light. The narrow beam cut through the gloom, and there it was. Not a modern safe, not a glittering pile of gold, but a dull, dark green steel footlocker, the kind soldiers used. It was old, flecked with rust, and bound with a simple, heavy-duty latch. Get it out, Cynthia commanded. It took both Leo and a reluctant Chloe to wrestle the heavy box from its tomb. They dragged it into the center of the room, leaving a trail of dust and grit on the rug. They stood over it, breathing heavily, their greed a palpable humming thing in the air. There's no combination lock, Leo observed, running his hands over its surface. Then get a crowbar. Cynthia said, her eyes never leaving the box. For God's sake, do I have to think of everything? Leo, looking exhausted, but running on pure adrenaline, went and returned with a long crowbar from the garage. He wedged the tip under the lip of the lid. He strained, his muscles bulging. The metal groaned in protest. Push, Cynthia yelled. With a final desperate heave, the latch gave way with a loud metallic shriek. The lid sprang open an inch. A musty smell, the scent of old paper and stale trapped air, wafted out. Silence. They all held their breath. Leo slowly, reverently lifted the lid. I leaned closer to my tablet, my own heart thudding against my ribs, even though I knew what they would find. I watched their faces. I saw the flash of ecstatic avarice in Cynthia's eyes, the trembling hope in Leo's, the wide-eyed wonder on Chloe's. And then I saw it all curdle, their shoulders slumped in unison. The air went out of the room. Inside the footlocker, nestled in faded felt lining, there was no cash, no gold bars, no bearer bonds. Instead, there were neat stacks of custom-made silver thumb drives, each one housed in its own precise foam cutout. Dozens of them. And beside them, taking up the other half of the box, were four thick black leather-bound ledgers, their spines embossed with nothing but a single year. Cynthia's face, which had been alight with triumph, collapsed into a sneer of pure disgust. She reached in and picked up one of the thumb drives as if it were a dead insect. "What is this junk?" She spat, her voice dripping with venom. "It's just office supplies. Where is the money?" "Leo, where is the goddamn money?" Leo stared into the box, his expression one of utter bewilderment. He picked up one of the ledgers. It felt heavy in his hands, dense with secrets. I don't understand." Chloe, ever the follower, echoed his confusion. "Maybe it's codes for bank accounts," Cynthia scoffed, throwing the thumb drive back into the box. "Richard wasn't a spy, he was a businessman. This is useless. All of this, for nothing." She kicked the footlocker, a futile gesture of rage that only hurt her own foot. She let out a yelp of pain and fury. I watched them, these three people I had given life to, or welcomed into my family, and I felt a cold, clean satisfaction. They were prospectors who had struck not gold, but bedrock. They hadn't found their inheritance. They had found the tombstone that marked its grave. But the epitaph, the story of how it had all died, was something they still had to read. Leo didn't answer her. He had taken his laptop from its bag and placed it on the floor beside the open footlocker. His hands moved with a strange, disconnected purpose, as if someone else were controlling them. He took one of the sleek silver thumb drives and slid it into the USB port. "Leo, what are you doing?" Chloe asked, her voice trembling slightly. "We don't know what's on there. It could be a virus." "It's not a virus," Cynthia sneered, rubbing her foot. "It's his tax records from 1998. It's worthless. The old bastard played us. He played us all." But Leo wasn't listening. He was staring at the laptop screen at the file directory that had just popped up. It wasn't a spreadsheet. It wasn't a document. It was a single folder labeled simply Projects. My breath caught in my throat. I knew that folder. I had named it. Leo's finger hovered over the trackpad. He clicked. The folder opened, revealing not a list of files, but a grid of video thumbnails. They were grainy, poorly lit, each one showing a different room. An office, a hotel suite, the back room of a construction site trailer. And in each thumbnail, the unmistakable silhouette of my husband Richard. And someone else. "What is this?" Leo murmured. He clicked on the first file. The video player opened. The image was jerky, filmed from a hidden camera tucked into the corner of a ceiling. The audio was muffled, full of static, but the sounds were horribly clear. I saw a young woman, she couldn't have been more than 20, sitting on the edge of a chair in what looked like Richard's old downtown office. She was clutching a portfolio. An intern, maybe. An applicant. I saw Richard walk into the frame. He was smiling that smile, the one everyone called charming, the one I knew was a baring of teeth. I didn't need to watch the rest. I had seen it before. I had catalogued it. I turned the volume down on my tablet, but I couldn't block out the memory of her muffled protests, of his low, soothing, monstrous voice. I watched my children's faces instead. Leo's jaw went slack. The colour drained from his face, leaving a pasty, sickly grey. He looked like he was going to be sick. He made a small choking sound, and his hand flew to his mouth. Chloe gasped a sharp, ragged intake of breath. "Oh my God," she whispered, her hands fluttering to her chest. "Oh my God." "Leo, turn it off." "Turn it off." Cynthia, however, was motionless. Her expression of greedy disappointment had been wiped away, replaced by a look of intense, horrified fascination. She didn't move. She didn't even blink. She just stared at the screen, her mind clearly working, processing, calculating. Leo, fumbling with the trackpad, his hands shaking violently, closed the video. The room was silent for a long moment, the only sound the faint hum of the laptop. It's a fake." Leo stammered, though there was no conviction in his voice. It has to be. A deep fake. Someone is trying to frame him. Frame a dead man, Cynthia said, her voice eerily calm. Click another one. No, Chloe cried. Don't. But Leo did. His movements were robotic. He clicked on another thumbnail, one filmed in what was clearly a cheap motel room. A different woman. The same scenario. The same sickening outcome. He closed it faster this time. Then another. And another. Each click was a hammer blow, demolishing the image of the father they thought they knew. After the fifth one, he slammed the laptop shut. The sudden silence was deafening. He sank back on his heels, his head in his hands. He wasn't just a developer, he whispered, his voice cracking. He was a monster. Chloe was openly sobbing now, her body shaking with grief and revulsion. All this time, he was... She couldn't finish the sentence. Cynthia finally moved. She reached into the footlocker and picked up one of the black leather ledgers, the one marked with the year 2005. She opened it to a random page. Her eyes scanned the neat, precise handwriting. My handwriting. This is more than just videos, Leo, she said, her voice low and steady. She held the ledger out. This is a business plan. Leo looked up, his face a mess of confusion and despair. What are you talking about? Listen, she said, and she began to read. She didn't read the most graphic parts. She read the summary. My summary. Subject, Amelia Rosewood, age 22. Connection, daughter of David Rosewood, Rosewood Construction. Incident date, June 12, 2005. Location, site trailer, Oak Haven project. Resolution, subject, agreed to non-disclosure. Consideration, Rosewood Construction, awarded exclusive framing contract for Phase 2, value $700,000 above lowest bid. Father complicit in silence. Cynthia looked up from the page, her eyes meeting Leo's. It's all in here. Dozens of them. Names, dates, details. How he bought their silence or coerced it. The interns he paid off. The tenants whose rent he forgave. The business partners he blackmailed into giving him favorable deals. She flipped a few pages. Every deal, every success, every dollar we ever had. It came from this box. The realization dawned on them, slow and sickening, like a creeping poison. The house they grew up in. The private schools, the European vacations, the trust funds. My life of quiet, comfortable desperation. It wasn't built on Richard's business acumen. It was built on a foundation of pain. It was cemented with the tears of young women. Our entire world, our social standing, our carefully curated family name was a monument to his predation. They weren't just looking at their father's sins. They were looking at the source code of their own lives. And I watched as the horror in their eyes began to curdle, to transform into something else entirely. Something far, far uglier. The first crack in their shared horror came from Chloe. She scrambled across the floor on her hands and knees, grabbing for the ledger in Cynthia's hands. We have to destroy it, she sobbed, her voice hysterical. All of it. We have to burn it. We have to pretend we never saw this. We have to erase him. For a single fleeting moment, I saw a flicker of agreement in Leo's eyes. He looked at the box of drives, at the ledgers, with an expression of pure revulsion. He looked like a man staring into an open sewer, wanting nothing more than to slam the lid shut and walk away. But Cynthia snatched the ledger back before Chloe could touch it. She held it to her chest, like a holy text, her knuckles white. Her eyes, when she looked at Chloe, were blazing with a cold fire I had only ever seen before in Richard. "Destroy it!" she hissed, her voice a low, vicious thing. "Are you insane?" She stood up, turning to face Leo, who was still kneeling on the floor, paralyzed by the enormity of the discovery. "Do you have any idea what this is?" "It's filth," Cynthia Leo choked out. "It's evidence of him being a monster. Wrong." Cynthia shot back, her voice sharp as glass. "This isn't a scandal. It's leverage. This isn't a liability. It's an asset. A multi-million-dollar asset. Chloe stared at her dumbfounded. Asset, Cynthia, these are victims. People he hurt. They were his victims. Cynthia corrected her gaze, locked on Leo. She took a step toward him, her voice dropping, becoming persuasive, seductive. He's gone now. But the leverage remains. Look at these names. She tapped the cover of the ledger. Rosewood Construction, the Van Horns, Judge Miller's daughter. These are some of the wealthiest, most powerful families in the state. Their reputations are everything. They paid for silence once. They will pay for it again. A new kind of silence fell over the room. It was a calculating silence. The shock had passed. Now the gears were turning. I could practically hear them grinding from my little room in Pleasant Meadows. "You're talking about blackmail," Leo whispered the word, tasting like ash in his mouth. "I'm talking about continuing the family business," Cynthia said, her lips curling into a triumphant smirk. She knelt down in front of him, putting a hand on his shoulder. Her touch was proprietary. "Your father wasn't just a monster, Leo. He was a brilliant monster. He built an empire on the one thing that never loses its value, secrets, and he left it all to you. Not the house, not the stocks. This. This is the real inheritance." She saw the conflict raging in his face. The war between the last vestiges of his conscience and the deep-seated, lifelong desire to fill his father's shoes, to be the powerful man Richard always wanted him to be. She saw his fear of losing the lifestyle he was accustomed to, the terror of being just an ordinary man with a worthless inheritance. And she pressed her advantage. "Think about it, Leo," she purred. "We do nothing, and what happens? We sell this house for a few million, split it 3 ways, and in 5 years it's gone. You're back to being a mid-level manager with a mortgage you can barely afford. Or, we use what he gave us. We don't just survive, we thrive. We become more powerful than he ever was." "No," Chloe whimpered from the bed. "It's wrong. It's evil." Cynthia didn't even glance at her. Her entire focus was on my son. "What's evil is being weak, Leo. Your father knew that. He knew that the world belongs to the people who are willing to take what they want. Are you going to let his entire life's work, this masterpiece of control, just rot in a box? Or are you going to be the son he always wanted?" Leo looked from Cynthia's gleaming, predatory eyes to Chloe's tear-streaked face. He looked at the footlocker, this Pandora's box of depravity and power. I saw the exact moment he made his choice. His back straightened. The weakness in his eyes hardened into a familiar, cold resolve. It was Richard's resolve. He stood up, brushing the dust from his knees. He looked down at the box, no longer with horror, but with a dawning sense of ownership. "Chloe, stop crying," he said, his voice flat, devoid of emotion. "Cynthia's right." Chloe's sobs hitched. "Leo, no. This isn't about him anymore." Leo continued, his voice gaining strength. "This is about us. This is about securing our future." He looked at Cynthia, and a grim understanding passed between them. A partnership was forged in that moment, over a foundation of human misery. We need a plan. We need to be careful, methodical. He sounded just like his father. I watched as they began to talk, their voices low and urgent. Their plans shifted in a heartbeat. The idea of selling my house was forgotten, a triviality. They were no longer children squabbling over an estate. They were successors plotting how to manage their vile new enterprise. They weren't just betraying me anymore. They weren't just trying to steal my home and my money. They were actively choosing to become him, to perpetuate the very evil that had defined my entire adult life. I pressed the power button on the tablet. The screen went dark. The silence of my small room at Pleasant Meadows rushed in to fill the void. It was a heavy, suffocating silence, thick with the ghosts of everything I had just witnessed. The beige walls seemed to press in on me, the cheerful, generic art print of a sailboat mocking me with its illusion of freedom. They thought they had found Richard's secret, the clever, monstrous source of his wealth. They had no idea. They had only peeled back the first layer of rot. They were standing in the antechamber of his hell, believing they had discovered its darkest heart. My hand was shaking a fine, barely controlled tremor. It wasn't from fear or weakness. It was from a rage so cold and so deep, it felt like it had frozen my bones. I reached under my mattress, my fingers finding the smooth, cool case of the burner phone I had hidden there months ago. I slid it out. The screen lit up stark and bright in the dim room. I scrolled to the single contact saved in its memory. Arthur Vance. I pressed the call button and lifted the phone to my ear. It rang twice before he picked up. "Hello." His voice was just as I remembered it. Calm, steady, professional. The voice of a man who dealt in facts, not hysterics. I took a breath. "Arthur, it's Olivia." There was a brief pause. "Olivia, I've been waiting for your call. Are you all right?" "I'm fine," I said, and the words tasted like a lie. I was not fine. I was a vessel of contained fury. "Arthur, it's time." "Time for what?" "Have they made a move on the house?" "Worse," I said, my voice low and even. "They found the footlocker." I heard him take a sharp breath. "I see." And then I began to confess. I didn't just tell him what my children had decided. I told him my story. The real story. The one I had never spoken aloud to another living soul. Richard didn't act alone. "Arthur." I began the words feeling foreign, sharp-edged in my mouth. Not really. He was the architect, the predator. But he forced me to be his archivist. The silence on the other end of the line was absolute, a void waiting to be filled. So I filled it. I told him everything. I told him about the early years when I was young and naive and thought Richard's possessiveness was a kind of intense love. I told him about the first time I suspected the scent of a strange perfume on his coat, a lie about a late meeting that didn't quite add up. I told him about the night he finally told me, not with shame, but with a terrifying pride, as if he were revealing a brilliant business strategy. He didn't just want me to know, I whispered into the phone, my eyes fixed on the blank wall opposite me. He wanted me to participate. It was my punishment for suspecting him, my price for the beautiful house and the comfortable life. My silence wasn't passive, Arthur. It was an active daily chore. I described the ritual, how he would come home high on his power and hand me a drive. He made me watch them, all of them. He said I needed to understand the leverage. Then he would give me a file, a handwritten summary of the victim, the connection, the method of coercion. I was the one who labeled the drives. My voice was a dead monotone. I had a label maker. I printed the names and dates in a neat block font. I was the one who transcribed his notes into those leather ledgers. My handwriting is on every single page. He made me listen to the recordings too, the whispered confessions from his victims, their terrified agreements to the terms of their own silence. He called it quality control. I paused, my throat tight. I managed the schedules. I knew which family had to make a donation to which political campaign. I knew which contractor had to submit an inflated bid. I knew which father had to look the other way. I was his bookkeeper, the bookkeeper for his entire rotten kingdom. My supposed memory loss, the act I had so carefully constructed. It wasn't just a tactic to fool my children. It was a desperate, symbolic prayer, a wish to truly forget, to erase the complicity that was etched into my soul. For 52 years, my mind had been Richard's filing cabinet. Losing it was the only escape I could imagine. "Olivia," Arthur said, his voice soft, full of a sorrow that almost broke me. "You were a victim too? You were under duress. Was I asked the question hanging in the sterile air of my room. Or was I a coward? At some point, the duress just becomes a life. You learn to live with the monster, to serve the monster, because the thought of fighting it is too terrifying. You tell yourself you're protecting your children, giving them a good life. But what I gave them was a poisoned inheritance, long before they ever found that box. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out over the manicured lawns of Pleasant Meadows. The golden years, they called this. It felt more like a gilded purgatory. My revenge was never about the house, Arthur. It was never about the money. I don't want it. It's filthy. My plan, it's about burning it all down. The whole kingdom, the legacy, the money, the name, all of it. I took a final, shuddering breath. The decision felt like a physical weight lifting from my chest, replaced by a terrifying, exhilarating lightness. And I know I said my voice clear and strong now, the tremor gone, that I'm standing right in the middle of it. I'm ready. I told him what I wanted him to do. I gave him the passwords to the encrypted cloud account where I had stored my own copies of everything made over years of quiet, meticulous planning. My confession, written and notarized, scans of every page of the ledgers, and copies of every single video. I want to leave nothing but ashes, Arthur, I finished. Theirs, his, and mine. A fragile mind is a powerful weapon. They thought my confusion was their opportunity, my silence their shield. They didn't realize I was simply giving them enough rope. I chose a Tuesday a day when the afternoon sun slanted through the blinds of my room at Pleasant Meadows, casting long, lazy stripes across the floor. I waited for the kindest nurse, a young woman named Sarah, with soft eyes and a perpetually worried frown. I had been practicing the tremor in my voice for weeks. Sarah. I whispered my voice, a dry rustle of leaves. I let my hand flutter near my chest, a gesture of unfocused distress. I think about them. My family. She knelt beside my chair, her voice the gentle murmur they reserve for children and the dying. Of course you do, Olivia. They love you very much. I can't see their faces. I said, a tear I had summoned from a well of pure performance sliding down my cheek. In my head, it's all foggy, like a dream I can't hold on to. I want to see them, all of them, together. I looked up at her, my eyes wide and pleading. Can we do that? A party, no? Not a party? A getting better meeting? A healing? Yes, a healing. The word was perfect. It was a term ripped from the pages of their own self-help pop psychology world. It resonated with a generation that believed a hashtag and a shared article could mend a fractured soul. Sarah's expression softened completely. She saw a broken old woman yearning for connection. She saw a project. That's a beautiful idea, Olivia. A family healing session. I think that can be arranged. I'll call your granddaughter Mia. She'll make it happen. And just like that, the first domino fell, pushed by a hand that thought it was helping. Mia, my poor Ernest. Mia seized the idea with the fervor of a true believer. I listened in on her phone call with Leo, her voice bright with misplaced hope. She had put her phone on speaker, a habit of her generation, filling my quiet room with their poisonous dynamic. Dad, Grandma wants to see us all, Mia announced. She called it a family healing session. Isn't that amazing? It's a breakthrough. I could hear the weary sigh from Leo. Mia, she's not there. A healing session. What does that even mean? She probably forgot she said it 5 minutes later. Then Cynthia's voice, sharp and saccharine, cut in. Now, Leo, don't be so cynical. It could be a wonderful thing, a chance for us to show everyone how much we care, to demonstrate our commitment to her well-being. I knew what she meant. A chance for a performance, a chance to shore up their image. What do you mean, show everyone? Leo asked, his suspicion piqued. Well, Mia said, her voice now laced with a strategic, youthful righteousness I had subtly planted the seeds for. I was thinking, a lot of family and friends have been asking about Grandma. They're worried. I thought I could, I don't know, live stream it just to a private Facebook group. That way everyone who loves her can see us all together, supporting her. It might, you know, encourage you and Mum to be a little more present. A short, sharp silence. The unspoken accusation hung in the air. Mia thought she was shaming them into being better people. She thought she was using social media to hold them accountable for their neglect. She was my perfect, unwitting executioner. Cynthia's recovery was immediate, masterful. Mia, that is a wonderfully modern idea. A virtual hug from the whole family. It shows such initiative. It will be a testament to this family's strength in the face of adversity. We'll do it at the house, your grandmother's house. It will be good for her to see it, to connect with her own space. Her own space. The space they were stripping bare, selling off piece by piece. The cruelty was breathtaking. Leo grumbled, his assent, cornered by his wife's enthusiasm and his daughter's moral high ground. He couldn't refuse, without looking like the heartless son he was. The stage was set. Not by them, but by me using their own vanity and guilt as my architects. The day of the healing session. The staff at Pleasant Meadows helped me into my best cashmere sweater, a soft lavender. They did my hair. They dabbed a little powder on my nose. They saw it as humoring a confused old woman's wish. I saw it as preparing for my debut. I was placed in a chair in the common room, a large tablet propped on a table in front of me, its camera eye glowing. The video feed flickered to life. There they were. My family assembled in my living room. The room looked sterile alien. The worn armchair where Richard used to sit was gone, replaced by a sleek, uncomfortable-looking leather thing that Cynthia must have rented for the occasion. The family photos on the mantelpiece had been rearranged, polished, curated for the camera. Leo and Cynthia sat on the sofa, a calculated foot of space between them, their hands resting in their laps. They were trying to project an image of solemn unity. Chloe stood awkwardly by the fireplace, wringing her hands, her face a mask of discomfort. She was the weakest of them, the most prone to genuine emotion, which made her the most dangerous to their lie. Mia was off camera running the technical side of things, her voice occasionally piping up with instructions. "Okay, Dad. Can you move a little to the left? The lighting is better." And on the large television screen mounted over the fireplace, there I was. A silent, oversized face. My expression was one I had perfected in the mirror, a placid vacancy, a hint of confusion in the eyes, my mouth slightly agape. I was a ghost at my own funeral. A portrait of senility they had painted themselves. Cynthia leaned forward, her smile aimed at the camera Mia was holding, not at my image on the screen. "Hello, everyone," she began, her voice dripping with artificial warmth. "Thank you for joining us in this intimate family moment. As many of you know, we've been navigating a difficult journey with our beloved mother and grandmother Olivia." She glanced at my face on the TV, a fleeting, dismissive look. It's a journey so many families face. The twilight years are precious, but they bring challenges. Hard choices have to be made, choices rooted in love and a profound desire for safety and peace. She was a master. In 2 sentences, she had framed their greed as a painful, loving duty. She was positioning them not as predators, but as martyrs. Leo cleared his throat, picking up the baton. He looked pained, but not for the right reasons. He looked like a man who had practiced his lines, but still feared he would forget them. "Moments like these, they remind us what's important," he said, his voice thick with counterfeit emotion. "Family, legacy, making sure that the people who gave us everything are cared for, protected, even when they can't protect themselves. He was talking about me, but he was thinking about the ledgers, the blackmail material, the legacy of filth he was so eager to inherit. I watched his face, the subtle twitch at the corner of his eye, the way his gaze kept flicking towards the empty space where Richard's study was. He was an open book, and I had read every word. I let my head loll slightly to the side, my eyes unfocused. On the screen, I was the picture of helplessness. In my lap, under the soft folds of a blanket, my hand was steady. My thumb hovered over the screen of the cheap disposable phone I had instructed Arthur to have delivered to me by a fan of my late husband, a courier who had no idea what he was really carrying. The message was already typed out, a single devastating word. It was Chloe's turn. She stepped forward, her movements jerky. She couldn't fake it the way Cynthia could. Her guilt was too real. I remember when I was a little girl. She began, her voice trembling. Mum she used to bake these apple pies. The whole house would smell of cinnamon. We'd sit at the kitchen table and she'd tell us stories. Her voice broke. A real tear, not a manufactured one like mine, traced a path through her makeup. She was remembering a mother I had once been, a life that Richard's darkness had slowly suffocated. For a split second, a shard of pity pierced my resolve. She was a victim too, in her own way. But then I saw her eyes meet Cynthia's, and the look that passed between them was one of shared complicity. The pity vanished, replaced by cold, hard necessity. This was not just about Richard anymore. It was about them, about the poison that had been passed down the rot that they had chosen to cultivate. Cynthia gave a sympathetic sigh for the camera placing a hand on Chloe's arm. So many cherished memories, she murmured, steering the narrative back on track. And that is why we are doing this, to preserve the dignity of those memories, to ensure Mum's final chapter is one of peace. Final chapter. The arrogance was stunning. They truly believed they were the authors of my story. As Chloe sniffled and tried to compose herself, I looked down at the phone in my lap. My thumb wrinkled and spotted with age pressed down on the glass. Now, the message was sent. Miles away in a sterile office, humming with the quiet power of servers and fiber optics, Arthur Vance would be executing the final phase. He would be pressing a button of his own. A digital command that would unleash a floodgate. For a few seconds, nothing happened. The performance in my living room continued. Cynthia was patting Chloe's back, whispering something in her ear. Leo was staring at his shoes. The quiet hum of the live stream, the illusion of a family healing, held. Then came the first sound. It wasn't a shout. It was a buzz. A low, insistent vibration from the coffee table. Leo's phone. It trembled against the wood, a frantic, angry insect. He ignored it, shaking his head slightly as if annoyed by the interruption. Then another. Cynthia's phone in her purse on the floor began to buzz. A higher, more frantic pitch. She frowned a crack in her flawless facade. Then it became a chorus. Chloe's phone in her pocket joined in. Then Mia's from across the room. It was a symphony of notifications, a digital tidal wave, crashing into their carefully constructed reality. The sound was jarring, invasive. It was the sound of the outside world, the real world, tearing a hole in their fiction. Leo, finally succumbing to the relentless buzzing, reached for his phone. His face, which had been a mask of pained solemnity, shifted to one of annoyance, then confusion. His eyes scanned the screen. I watched him on the TV, his expression magnified. I saw the exact moment the words registered. I saw his pupils dilate. The colour drained from his face, leaving behind a waxy, sallow pallor. His hand began to shake. "What is it?" Cynthia hissed, her performance voice gone, replaced by her true, sharp-edged tone. He didn't answer. He just stared at the screen, his mouth opening and closing like a fish pulled from water. Cynthia snatched her own phone from her purse. Her perfectly manicured thumb swiped across the screen. The transformation was even more dramatic. Her face, a moment before a picture of compassionate, daughterly concern, contorted into a mask of pure, unadulterated horror. Her mouth fell open in a silent scream. The first news alert I knew would be the big one, the one Arthur had primed with the most explosive material. I could picture the headline burning on their screens. Prominent developer Richard Sterling exposed as serial abuser in posthumous data leak. Chloe, seeing their faces, fumbled for her own phone. Her cry was the first audible sound of their world ending. It was a thin, high-pitched wail of disbelief. No. No, it can't be. Mia, from across the room, was looking at her own device. Dad, what is this? What's going on? Her voice was filled with a child's panic, the sound of a world that had suddenly tilted off its axis. Then came the second wave of alerts, the ones Arthur had timed for 60 seconds after the first, the ones that implicated them directly. Family attempted to weaponize blackmail material source claims. Sworn affidavit by widow Olivia Sterling. Details decades of coerced complicity and children's criminal conspiracy. It was all there. My confession, their plan, the ledgers, the videos, everything. Unleashed not just to their small circle of friends in a private Facebook group, but to a dozen national news outlets, to the state attorney general's office, to the world. Leo looked up from his phone, his eyes wide with terror, and met my gaze on the television screen. For the first time, he saw me. Not the confused old woman, not the inconvenient mother, but the architect of his ruin. The placid, vacant expression on my screen hadn't changed, but now in the context of their implosion, it looked serene, godlike, terrifying. You, he whispered the word, barely audible. It was you. All of it. Cynthia let out a choked sob. The live stream. She gasped, her eyes darting towards Mia's camera, which was still rolling, still broadcasting their unraveling to their friends, their business associates, their entire social circle. Turn it off. Mia. Turn it off. But Mia was frozen, staring at her phone, her face a mess of tears and dawning comprehension. She was finally seeing her parents for who they were. And then, through the large bay window behind them, came the final, beautiful, terrible punctuation mark. A flash of red, a flash of blue, the unmistakable rhythmic strobing of police lights painting their horrified faces in strobing bursts of colour. The sound of a car door slamming shut outside. Then another. I did not wait to watch the end. I had seen enough. With a quiet, steady finger, I reached out and terminated the video call. The screen in front of me went black, reflecting my own calm face. I folded the blanket in my lap, placed the burner phone inside, and stood up. The tremors were gone. My hands were steady. My steps were firm as I walked out of the common room, leaving the ghosts of my family trapped in the digital ether. I walked down the gleaming antiseptic hallway of Pleasant Meadows, my small pre-packed bag in my hand. No one tried to stop me. To them, I was just Olivia, the confused resident wandering the halls. They didn't see the woman who had just burned a corrupt dynasty to the ground. Arthur had arranged everything. The immunity deal was ironclad. My sworn affidavit, my full cooperation, and the documented psychological abuse I had endured at Richard's hands had been my shield. I was a witness, not a conspirator. A victim who had finally found the strength to fight back. I didn't take a penny of Richard's money. It was never his to begin with. It was blood money, every last dollar, tainted by the pain of others. The government seized all of it, every property, every stock, every hidden account. It would be funneled into a restitution fund for the victims whose names I had so meticulously recorded in those leather-bound ledgers. That was the only true justice. I walked out the front doors of Pleasant Meadows into the clean, crisp air of the afternoon. A simple sedan was waiting for me at the curb, just as Arthur had promised. The driver didn't speak my name. He simply opened the back door, took my bag, and I got in. I didn't look back. I had chosen my destination from a map, my finger landing on a tiny speck on the Atlantic coast. A place with no history for me. A place where the name Sterling meant nothing. A place where I could breathe. My new life is small. It's a clean two-room apartment with a balcony that overlooks the ocean. The walls are white. There are no pictures. There are no ghosts in the furniture. The past is a phantom limb. You know it's gone, but you still feel the ache. Some relationships, I have learned, are not relationships at all. They are tumors, and the only way to survive is to cut them out, no matter how much of yourself you think you are losing in the process. Last week, a letter arrived. It was forwarded by Arthur, the only person who knows where I am. The handwriting was Mia's, young, round, and angry. I opened it with hands that trembled for the first time in months. It was short, full of confusion, rage, and a single heartbreaking question that ricocheted in the quiet of my small apartment. "Grandma," it read, "I don't understand any of it. They're all gone. Everything is gone. I just have to know. Was any of it real? Was any of the love real?" I have started writing back to her. I write a new letter every day. I fill pages with the things I could never say. I tell her about her grandfather, the monster who wore a philanthropist's mask. I tell her about my fear, my complicity, my slow, suffocating death over 52 years. I tell her that the love I had for her, my fierce protective love, was the one true thing in that entire house of lies. It was the love that fueled my war. It was the love that forced me to destroy everything to save her from its poison. I don't know if I'll ever send the letters. Perhaps they are not for her. Perhaps they are for me. A way to map the geography of my own survival. This morning, I took my coffee out onto the balcony. The sun was rising a brilliant orange slash across the horizon. The air was cold and sharp with salt. Below, the waves crashed against the shore with a relentless rhythmic roar, the sound of something ancient and powerful, washing everything clean. For 52 years, I was Mrs. Richard Sterling. I was a mother. I was a gatekeeper of secrets. I was a ghost in my own life. Now, under this vast, empty sky, with the taste of salt on my lips and nothing to my name but my own choices, I am finally terrifyingly real. The story doesn't truly end here. It ends with a choice, the same kind of choice I had to make. Do you let the secrets of the past define you, or do you bring them into the light, no matter the cost? If you were in Mia's shoes, would you want to receive those letters? Let me know in the comments below if you think forgiveness is possible, or if some things once broken can never be pieced back together.